Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Art of MMA. I'm Mike Ginn. That's professional kickboxer, the mechanic Brandon Catino, back in action for another week. Of course, we're going to talk about the fallout from UFC San Antonio, talk about the Hall of Fame class for UFC coming up this year. It's a stacked class, and we're right off the bat going to hit up the whole Colby Covington issue. Before we get to all that, go ahead and check out fightersfirst.shop. Support Brandon, support the brand. Support all the officially licensed collections. We got a lot of really cool stuff in the shop. We got some MMA fighters. We got some boxers, some professional wrestling, a lot of stuff going on in there. Let our apparel be a part of your story. Fightersfirst.shop. Brandon, how you feeling today, buddy?
Man, feeling good, man. Feeling good.
Excited by some of these giant signings we got going on. We got wide receiver core getting recouped. We got new tight ends. We got a whole bunch of stuff going on. Defensive linebacker, safeties.
Yeah, man. You know, NFL's looking good for me so far. I mean, my hockey team's looking good.
I'm not going to talk to you about the Devils because honestly, I'm a Blackhawks fan and that's not good. So I'm just going to leave hockey to you. I know that's a little polar opposite in the world of racism and racial stuff. Like the black guy's not talking, like the white guy's not talking about hockey. No, I live down in Florida. No, even though the Lightning aren't bad, obviously we've been to some Stanley Cups recently and some other stuff, but I'm not a natural Floridian, so no. But you keep the hockey over there. I'm already on the baseball season now. We're talking about the Marlins. Got everything going on with the Rays. Nah.
All right.
Brandon, I'm going to jump right into this. A lot has been going on since we talked about Leon Edwards retaining his title against Kamaru Usman. The fallout, if you will. Colby Covington, as we would say in the South, God bless his heart. This guy can't keep his foot out of his mouth. It goes from some points being promotion, like he's promoting himself for a fight, Conor McGregor-like, to sometimes he just goes way too far. And I'm disappointed on so many levels from so many different angles, but I'm going to state the facts, and then I'm going to let you give your opinion first before I go on one of my notorious rants. People are waiting for the rant. Yeah, it's been a while. It's coming back today. Don't worry. Brandon can go check his phone for like 15 minutes after he talks because I got some shit to get off my chest. But in the aftermath of Colby Covington and Leon Edwards basically being set up for the next fight, Edwards said he didn't deserve it. Covington went as far to say, well, if you don't fight me, Dana's going to strip you. Jon Anik came out partially promoting his podcast because he was getting ready to interview Bilal Muhammad. And some fans had said, hey, we think Bilal should be next, not Colby. And he's like, yeah, I can see that. You know, Colby's great, but Bilal's one has gone undefeated in 9 straight fights. Of course, the one no contest in there with Leon Edwards. But basically, he was just saying, yeah, Bilal Muhammad definitely deserves a chance, whether it's now or later. He deserves that shot. And Colby then came out, and I'm going to quote Colby because I don't want to twist his words, exactly what he said. So, you wanted to lick my freaking balls in London. Oh, Colby, this. But then you want to go back behind the stage and cheerlead for a racist. So he associates with racism and Bilal Muhammad. Then he goes on to say, and you know, Jon Anik, dude, I don't want your kids to grow up without a dad. Just realize you live in Boca. I live in Miami, motherfucker. You're not too far from me, so you better shut your fucking mouth. You poke the bear. Now you get the bear comes after you. That is his exact quote. Brandon, you don't go after employees. You don't go after staff. You don't go after a fight. Like, Jon Anik's not a fighter. Not only did he threaten to kill him, he also basically went off the rails completely. What are your thoughts?
I mean, man,
did he cross the line?
It's another MMA fighter threatening somebody. You know, it's like this isn't the first time. This definitely won't be the last time. You know, it's Colby Covington's thing, man, where he tries to get on people, under people's skin, and then he turns it into something like way out of line. But again, it's like saying, like, I'm not surprised, like saying this is stuff that happens, like, I feel like on a weekly basis or like every other week.
I personally don't see it happening with staph, though. Like, I don't see it happening. Like, first of all, don't worry, Brandon. We'll talk much more later in the episode. I promise you, people. I promise you. First of all, this is personal to me. I'll be very honest to people at home. This is personal to me. When I was a nobody, one of my first online sites, not the first, but one of the first ones I really did was a website called Pure Style. And it was a men's magazines type style, kind of like Maxim. And for one of the sports interviews, Jon Anik at the time was on ESPN MMA Live. I reached out. I had done an interview with Molly Karam, and I was like, cool, let me get the rest of the staff. Let me reach out to Jon Anik. And Jon Anik, he wasn't the first, but he was like the second or third like interview I had done with like somebody notable in the sports world. He had no problem. He reached out. He's like, yeah, I'm all for it. Tell ESPN PR I want to do it, and we're going to make this happen. Forever grateful. Jon Anik is one of those people who gave me a big pop when he didn't have to. He was on his way up. I was a nobody. Fast forward a few years, right before Art of MMA starts, he gets the job at UFC. Once again, I say, John, you're with UFC now. Would be really cool to do an updated interview. Not a problem. He got it approved by the UFC PR. Bam. Jon Anik got the interview done. So I've interviewed Jon a couple times. And we know Jon has done a lot of things for the community. Like he's done interviews with, good friends of ours, Cage My IQ, Dan Bakley. He's done interviews with pretty much any podcast that asks him to do an interview in the MMA world. He's all about the community. The dude is genuinely, we say a lot of people, oh, he's a really good dude because he did it in favor for somebody. No, he's actually a really good dude. And Jon Anik doesn't need me to defend him because Jon Anik's a kid from Boston. He's a scrappy, he might be little, but he's a scrappy kid from Boston. Jon Anik doesn't need any of us to defend him. But Jon Anik is too professional to defend himself. He's not going to say anything in public that can then turn around and be turned against him by the UFC, by Dana White, by the brass, and make him lose his job over Colby's comments. Jon's not going to say anything publicly. No matter how he feels behind the scenes, he will not. I can't speak for Jon, but I promise you, I feel he would not ever address this publicly. I think the closest I saw is he made a comment about some sports thing and an umpire, like the umpire should be, I don't know, hurt or whatever because of some calls he made. It was a sports thing. And somebody else said, see, he does the same thing Colby did. And Jon was like, well, it's not quite the same. But that's about it. That's the only comment I can find from him about the whole subject at all. And before I get to Colby, I do want to say another problem I have with this whole thing. And yes, let me put this out there. Colby crossed the line. There's certain things you just don't do. Is Dana White. Dana has gone out to defend the fact that Colby is next in line. That's fine. As Leon followed up on Tony Ferguson, Dana White privilege, right? We know Colby's one of Dana's guys. Whatever. Deal with it. The fight was going to happen. The fight's going to happen whether Edwards wants it at this point, whether I want it, Brandon wants it, you want it at home. It sounds like that fight is going to happen. But Jon Anik is one of Dana White's employees. Brandon is not technically my employee, but he is a friend of mine and a partner in this business from a licensing point of view. If somebody came after Brandon, I would quickly jump to his defense, whether he liked me to or not. I would not let somebody talk about somebody that's on my staff as a boss. And I damn sure wouldn't let another employee, because fighters are UFC employees, basically. You can call them independent contractors if you want, but they have contracts. Talk about another one. That's an HR issue right there from any business in the world. I don't care if you work at Tiger Schulman's. I don't care if you work at any business anywhere, including the UFC. You don't threaten to kill another employee, whether you're being blasphemous or speaking factual. The last time Colby talked like this, Masvidal, as Masvidal says, allegedly snuck up on him and got him. And now Colby's threatening to do the same thing to Jon Anik. So, yeah, that's considered a real threat down there in Miami and the way people roll and the way people move. And for Dana White to not comment on this publicly at all, I'm not shocked. You're talking about the same guy that runs Power Slap. You're talking about the same guy that slapped up his wife on New Year's Eve without any repercussions. So why would he care that one employee, especially one of his favorites, is threatening Jon Anik? Look, I don't care if you like Jon Anik as a play-by-play announcer. That everybody has their favorites. Some like Morrow, some like Mike Goldberg. I used to love Mike Goldberg. But Jon Anik's a good dude who's just doing his job. And he has a right to have an opinion as well on who he thinks should be next. He didn't diss Colby. He just said Bilal's, undefeated in his last 9 fights. Maybe he should deserve a shot. That's not a bad thing. That's not even a slight at Colby. Colby Covington is one of the best fighters in that welterweight division. He's been that way for a long time. But he's also one of the worst human beings. We've seen this guy evolve from a quiet kid sleeping on Jorge Masvidal's couch because his girlfriend kicked him out to being one of the loudest people in the division trying to be Conor McGregor. Colby made this comment with Leon Edwards saying, hey, you're not Conor McGregor. You can't call your own shots. Well, guess what, Colby? You're not Conor McGregor either. And Conor might get away with punching an old guy in a bar in Ireland. But you're not in Ireland. You're here in America. And you're somebody who loves to run to the cops. Well, what happens if Jon Anik presses charges on you for threatening his life? Because there is no mistaking when you say, I don't want your kids to grow up without a dad, what that means. And then to point out that he's in Boca and you're in Miami. Colby, keep it to the fights. If you want to talk all the mad shit you want, keep it to the fights. Talk about Masvidal. Talk about Edwards. Talk about Burns. Talk about Hamzat. Talk about anybody and everybody. And I'm not even talking about the fact that you've ducked Hamzat 4 straight times. I'm not talking about the fact that you continue to duck Gilbert Burns, even though he calls you out every 5 seconds, and everybody else in the top of that division to hold on to your number 1 spot. Like Brandon said last week, it seems like when a fighter loses, they don't fall down the rankings. They're still right there at the top of the rankings. Well, you benefited from that. Keep Jon Anik's name out your mouth. Because whether it's Jimmy Smith or a number of other fighters that are active now, there's a lot of people gunning for you now because you took an unusual step to go beyond the fight game. There's going to be a lot of people that don't agree with a lot of people in this world, Brandon. But I'm not out there threatening to go to your house and murder you anytime you and I get in a disagreement on this show. And we're not peers. You'll kick my ass. But we're peers in a level, like as far as like broadcasting. He didn't go after Daniel Cormier when Daniel Cormier said Belal Muhammad should be next. He didn't go after Michael Bisping. He went on Bisping's show. A lot of people have said Belal Muhammad deserves an opportunity. And this whole racist thing, because Belal Muhammad's Palestinian and sticks up for his people, that's also another thing that's gotten blown way out of proportion. I know, and I'm not going to get political at all on this show, but I know a lot of people feel strongly when it comes to that part of the world. Colby Covington, you live in Miami, bro. Nothing happening in Israel and Palestine is your problem. You're not Jewish. You're not Palestinian. That's not your problem. Your problem is that Belal Muhammad keeps calling you out and you don't want to fight him. Your problem is that that Leon Edwards said you don't deserve a fight. And you're getting all butthurt trying to talk up this fight. Talk about the fight, Colby, because you crossed the line. And if Jon Anik pressed charges on you the way you press charges on everybody else, you deserve it. And quite honestly, to end this segment with a little bit of humor, Brandon, I hope that the next Colby Covington fight, Jon Anik shows up with Fabricio Verdum behind him with a boomerang in his hand. And see how tough he is then. See how tough he is then when Fabricio has the boomerang in his hand. Because you ain't talking shit to him either. You went to Australian authorities and pressed charges. So stop acting like a tough guy, Colby. You're a fantastic fighter. Leave it at that. Let your fighting speak for you. Then a lot of people would support you a lot more. Trying to find a positive spin on that, Brandon. I'm trying to, but man, that's and I could have gone way more hellfire on that one. But the truth is, I'm not trying to make this a 45-minute show or an hour show. So that's my thoughts on that. Let's move on. Normally we talk about the fights right off the bat, but I wanted to get that off my chest so we could go on and have a decent show. Instead of the good, the bad, the ugly, it's kind of more like the ugly, the meh, and then we're finishing off on a good note and a positive note with the Hall of Fame stuff. But Brandon, last weekend, UFC San Antonio, Marlon Chito Vera going against the Sandman, Cory Sandhagen. You had Holly Holm in action. You had Nate Landwehr, Macy Barber, one of my favorites, of course. You love to tease me about that one. So she was in action. A lot of good stuff going on. A lot of split decisions once again. We could spend 3 hours talking about MMA judging, but we'll leave it alone because at the end of the day, in the main event, the right guy did win. What did you think about Cory Sandhagen beating Marlon Vera via split decision?
Yeah, man. Cory Sandhagen did his thing, man. He was in complete control of this fight. Saying Chito Vera didn't really come alive until the final minute of the last round. But by that time, saying Cory Sandhagen had already did enough. Saying he controlled the distance. He controlled the pace. Saying to me, Chito Vera did not have any answers. For anything Sandhagen did.
Yeah, I gave Vera the third round, and the third, fourth, and fifth rounds weren't dramatically that far apart to where I could be like, oh my God, I can't believe a judge gave Vera that fight. Because when I rewatched the fight, yeah, Sandhagen had the takedowns, but he didn't really do much with them in the last couple rounds, right? He kept taking them down. He kept controlling the rounds, but he didn't do much with those takedowns. But Sandhagen definitely controlled the first couple rounds. And I gave Sandhagen the fourth and fifth round just because he had so much control time. But like I'm not with everybody saying, "Oh my God, it's such a what's wrong with MMA judging on this one?" I think it was a bad decision for one of the judges to give Vera the call, but I do think the right guy won in the end. I think Cory Sandhagen clearly won the fight. I don't think it was close. I think I would have given him 4 rounds to 1, 49-46. As Chris Lee gave him. D'Amato gave him 50-45. Ojeda gave Vera the 48-47. So, it is what it is. But that fight's now in the books, and it leads to a couple things. One, Sean O'Malley's back to being undefeated because every time Vera gets a hiccup. And by the way, I was pulling for Vera because I so badly wanted this to set up the Vera O'Malley rematch. Because if Vera wins this, it makes so much sense on paper. It makes so much sense on pay-per-view buys. There's a story there that can lead into something new. Sandhagen winning really kind of messed up the whole storyline for Dana and crew because now you're talking about going on merit value, right? Like what's next for Cory Sandhagen? He already lost to Aljamain. Aljamain's already lined up with Henry Cejudo. So he calls out Merab. We didn't know that Merab was actually recovering from an injury right now. So he's not available at the moment. Of course, Sandhagen just fought. So they got some time to set up that fight, but they both seem interested in it. Does that fight make the most sense to you?
Yeah, I want to say that you're saying you got Aljo and Cejudo coming up. O'Malley is going to get the winner there. Sandhagen versus Merab, and then you can get Chito Vera versus Peter Yan.
If Yan wants to stick around, there's a lot of talk that Yan might be ready to go back to Russia and continue or just do different stuff. I would also say another good fight for Vera would be, and you hate to see somebody who's climbed that far up the food chain because he's come from like all the way out of nowhere and to keep on winning, but I would love to see him against like a rising fighter like a Ricky Simone, or even a veteran to kind of try to like bounce back. Somebody like Dominic Cruz. They fought, but Cruz. I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. That one's already been done. Yudong Song, there's another guy right there. I mean, he's out of his fight coming up, but he could be ready, some point in the future. But he's in that weird position because he has fought a lot of these guys on the way to the top. And he's kind of stuck waiting. Like now, okay, well, maybe I'll fight somebody else that loses. Maybe if O'Malley fights one of these guys and he loses, then maybe they can have that rematch. But if O'Malley wins again, O'Malley's probably next in line for Cejudo or Aljamain. We also know if Henry Cejudo wins, then that whole division's being held up because Cejudo's talking about fighting there, fighting 45, fighting, doing different things like he used to. Aljamain might be moving up at some point, according to Merab. Like Merab's waiting for his spot when Aljamain ever moves up. So that was something I never really thought about considering. But I think when we talk about what's next, I think it's pretty much clear cut for that one. In the co-main event, Holly Holm looked fantastic. Holly just cruised to a victory over Yana, now Santos, formerly Kunitskaya. I always butcher it. Did I say it right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Kunitskaya. Holly looked great. Look, Holly's looked great for a while. She had that bad split decision loss to Caitlin Vieira. But look, since she lost to Nunes last time, she's won 3 out of 4. I think she wins one more fight, Brandon. I think she's got to be back in that conversation for Amanda. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I could probably really see her versus Juliana Pena if they don't give Pena the title shot. Maybe they go with Nunes versus Aldana, and then like I said, you get home versus Pena, and the winner there maybe gets the title shot.
That's another division that's really held up by a lot of people that have already fought people, right? Like the top three after Nunes is Pena, Pennington, and Holm. There's talk of Nunes and Pena running it back for a third time, but Dana doesn't seem super excited about that fight. Nunes has been kind of spending time, with her new baby, taking time off. Pena is recovering from injury from the last fight. Pennington's already fought all of them and lost to most of them, even though she's now number 2.
Yep.
The only thing I also see if Holm doesn't want to wait around because she did just sign a new extension to her fight deal that'd probably be the last one of her career, she said, is running it back with Caitlin Vieira, who's number 4 right next to her. Let's get that split decision. Let's figure it out. We know a lot of fans thought Holly won that fight. The judges went with Caitlin. Let him run it back and get that loss out of the way because otherwise I see Holly's stuck waiting. You're right. Adana could get the shot if they want to do somebody new. She's already just fought Santos. Kianzad's there. Macy Chason's there. Carol Rose is there. Carol's another girl coming up really fast. Maybe run back the Miesha Tate fight, but Miesha's been spending more time at 125 than 135. Though after that last one, she said she'd probably be happier at 135. So who knows if she wants to continue making that cut. And then you got some new fighters, right? Like people you never really know that much of, like Josiane Nunes and Chelsea Chandler all the way down at the end of the rankings. Holly's not going to jeopardize her number 3rd ranking to fight a number 14 or 15 person. And unfortunately, I think with defections over the years and other promotions like PFL and Bellator building up their fighting divisions, the UFC's bantamweight women's division isn't as deep as it used to be, at least in my opinion. I know there's a ton of girls in Invicta right now that are ready to make that jump, but even then, most of them are strawweights and atom weights. So what do you do? And then as far as the other side, Yana, at least I think Yana actually has more options, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, to me, I feel like Aldana, like I said, if they don't do with the Pena rematch, I say Aldana will be the one who'll get the next shot. And like I said, you just do Holm and Pena, because like I said, because Holly Holm has been I think Pennington twice. She does have the loss to Vera. So it's like to me those are Holly Holm's options. While Santos, she just fights somebody else, who's in the rankings, behind her.
There is one more fighter, by the way, that I think Holly Holm could fight, and I haven't seen her fight in a while, so I don't know if she's hurt or she's just done because she is getting up there in age. Is Durandamy. She lost to Durandamy back in 2017. That's somebody who said she was interested in coming back at 135 pounds. She just had a kid. Yeah, yeah, okay, that's what it is. She had a kid. Yeah. But I heard her just I think it was between the Pena Nunes fight and rematch. She said she wanted to keep fighting at 135 pounds. But I haven't seen or heard from her since. I didn't know she had a kid, so that explains a lot. But
yeah, I want to say I think she just had a boy. I think it was last week.
Oh, okay. So she's gonna be gone for a while. But Holly just fought too, so Holly's got, quite a few months to go before she gets back in the cage. That's another one. Like de Randamie, that's a loss that she could try to avenge if de Randamie wants to jump back in the rankings because she's been inactive so long. She's not even in the rankings anymore. That's another top fighter that, you could get. And then another one, if Shevchenko wants to ever move up, that's another loss she could try to avenge from 2016. So I think at this point, I think Holly Holm is more about avenging while she waits for a shot, personally. But we'll see. Real quick on the rest of that card, Nate Landwehr proved he could get it done via submission skills. He doesn't have to just sit there and stand and bang. And Brandon, this is going to hurt my soul, bro. Macy Barber got the split decision win over Andrea Lee, but she shouldn't have won that fight. I think Lee won that fight with the takedowns, the control, stuff like that. What did you think?
Yeah, man. Like I said, I think I was kind of with everybody as well. I thought Lee kind of did more, but I mean, hey, this is sometimes how it goes with the interpretation of the rules and everything like that. And of course, like we talk about MMA judging down in Texas. That Texas.
Yeah, I think Lee controlled. Like we talked about a little bit with Sandhagen. I think Lee just controlled way too much of those rounds to give Macy. And then even then, sometimes Macy lost the battle on the feet in like the later rounds.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm happy for Macy. I'm happy she gets to continue to go up the food chain, but I didn't think that she won that fight. And then I'll also tell you another one. I thought Nshikani beat Duraev, and Duraev got that decision. So it was split decisions everywhere. Daniel Pineda left no doubt. He got the submission guillotine win over Lutz. Lucas Alexander over Peterson. Trevin Giles, another split decision. He got the win over Parsons. I did personally think that was a good decision. What about you?
Yeah. Like, again, man, it's.
You didn't watch that fight, did you?
No. I was gonna say no. It's the judging, man. It's always it can always just be tricky. It's like they say, don't leave it in the hands of the judging.
And then Vergara got the knockout over De Silva, and Altamirano got the win over Salvador. That is UFC San Antonio. Next week, no UFC fights, so we're going to be talking either PFL or Bellator. I'm going to leave that up to Brandon, which one we talk about. Both of them got some pluses and minuses. I personally think the PFL card might be a little bit more worth talking because it's the beginning of the season. Of course, PFL also just had their European debut last week with Simon Powell getting it going. The reason why we don't talk about that is just real quick. We chose to just kind of narrow it down, make the show a lot faster, talk about whatever the best or more notable card of the week that people were talking about each week. Sometimes that's UFC. It won't always be UFC. We're going to pick one, and if Brandon and I disagree, I'll probably go with Brandon's opinion just to be kind of out of the box. So you might see a lot more PFL and Bellator talk this season over the UFC. It's just so far this point in time. And the UFC pay-per-views will pretty much always take the top of the trending chart. So there's not really much debate about that. Obviously, 287 coming up and stuff like that down in Miami. We'll talk about that. But next week, we'll see which one we talk about. We'll see which card is more explosive and which one has better fights. So, last subject of the day, Brandon. Man, this is such a stacked UFC Hall of Fame class of 2023. I've never seen 4 fighters go in at one time. We usually see 2. I know it was a big deal when last year we saw Khabib and DC go in together. This year we got the first ever lightweight champion in Jens Pulver, which, by the way, very well deserved. And I love his reaction because they had him on like a stream while he was streaming UFC. They were like, "Hey, guess what, Jens? You're not in the Hall of Fame." And he just like couldn't contain his emotion, dropping F-bombs and everything, Jens Pulver style. So I love that. Jose Aldo, Anderson Silva, which was the reason I was even going to talk about this in the first place. And then last weekend, to throw in another name in, Cowboy Cerrone. Now, I will say I have a hard time inducting fighters when their career just ended because, fighters, is your career ever really over sometimes? Like a lot of these guys, like Jose Aldo's fighting this weekend. Just to let y'all know. We'll talk about the end of the show because I do want to mention it. But Jose Aldo's boxing this weekend. Mm-hmm. So, like combat sports, Anderson Silva's still been boxing. I wouldn't put it past Cowboy Cerrone if he wanted to make a quick paycheck. I mean, he's been juicing up, so I don't know if he could pass the drug test at this point. He admitted it. He's like, "Look, I avoided steroids my whole career, but now look at me." So yeah, I mean, Cowboy probably ain't passing a piss test anytime soon. But let me go through, and I just want to hear a couple words on each person for you. What's your first thoughts on Jens Pulver?
Honestly, he is one of the reasons why I have my man, I don't know how to explain it. Like, because I saw an interview he did, and he gave a reasoning for why he fights, and I guess I want to say it. What's the word I'm looking for?
Inspiration.
Well, no, I felt the parallel, like on what he said to one of my reasons on why it is that I fight, on why I compete. So that really is like that really is the first thing. Like, anybody says Jens Pulver, I'm gonna be like, yeah, he's like that's the first thing that really pops into my head.
When I think of Jens Pulver, I immediately obviously think about what he means to the sport. He's, dude first started fighting back in 1999, back when the sport was still, it wasn't brand new, but it was starting to get weight classes, starting to get like mainstream. And of course, he became the first ever lightweight champion, defended it, his fights with BJ Penn. And furthermore, his time in WEC. Like, he's one of those dudes that put WEC kind of on the map. He didn't win a lot of those WEC fights. He was back and forth on a lot of them because, he went to war with some of the guys who were killers back then. Leonard Garcia, Uriah Faber, Cub Swanson, Joe Lozon. I can't even talk today. Joe Lozon, BJ Penn. He fought a who's who at the time. And I know a lot of people will look at his record and say, oh, 27, 19, and 1. He fought way too long. Well, there's no question he kind of hung on a little bit too long. But Jens Pulver is a pioneer in that sport, and I'm happy to see him to get his flowers, as they say, and kudos to him. Next guy, Jose Aldo. Why? I think the better question is, why wouldn't he be, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's probably the best 145 champion in UFC history, and definitely in WEC history,
and the first ever featherweight champion in the UFC when they merged the promotions. My thing about Jose Aldo is that kind of goes with the Cerrone thing. Like, I'm never really sure that dude's done, and the fact that he reinvented himself going down in divisions to keep on fighting and winning, and honestly, if he hadn't lost against Merab, I'm not sure he still wouldn't be fighting if he had somehow beat Merab. And by the way, talk about greatest takedown defense in the history of the game. Merab takes people down at will. He did not take Jose Aldo down at will.
Mm-hmm. And he was 0-16 in that fight.
Yeah. I think he had one, but it wasn't considered a takedown. They were kind of just like a scramble, but Jose Aldo wasn't going to fight off his back, so he made sure you couldn't take him down. But also, people underestimated his jiu-jitsu skills. Obviously, he's Brazilian, but he wanted to stand and bang with you. He made leg kicks famous. Like, I got so mad at him when he lost a couple fights because he wouldn't throw his leg kicks. Like, and I was like, that's why you lost. Those Max Holloway fights, I was screaming, kick, 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 and he wouldn't. He was trying to stand and go boxing with him. And obviously, Holloway had the reach and had the advantage. But, man, Frankie Edgar, Chad Mendez, Kenny Florian, Uriah Faber, all these names couldn't touch him. I mean, he made Uriah Faber's leg so purple one time, you worried for Faber's future health of ever being able to fight again. The amazing, the great Anderson Silva. Thoughts?
Yeah, man. I mean, he has my favorite knockout in UFC history, and most likely probably in MMA history, man. His performance against Forrest Griffin, it was just beautiful.
Does the end of his career hurt the GOAT conversation? Like, I know at this point you can't put him up there with John Jones and could be even some other people who basically have been undefeated their whole careers. But does the last, was it 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 out of 9 fights, losing those fights, does that hurt his legacy?
I mean, it doesn't hurt his legacy. I mean, dude, his legacy was built on that title run he had, man. All those defenses and everything like that, man. You can't take that away.
Anderson Silva won almost every fight in the UFC. He actually won every single fight in the UFC up until Chris Weidman and his leg broke. Up until that leg break, or actually, he got caught the first time, right?
Yeah.
And then the second time he broke his leg.
Yep.
But up until Chris Weidman caught him with that punch when Anderson Silva was being a little too cocky and didn't lean back quite enough, and he got knocked out. Up until that point, he won every single fight in the UFC. Now, Chael Sonnen was about 30 seconds away from beating him, but, you got to finish the fight. Mm-hmm. Other than that, he had some up and downs on his way to the UFC. Yushin Akami and the illegal kick, a lot of stuff in Japan and Hawaii and stuff. But, man, once he got to the UFC, it was lights out. Nobody could touch him, including Akami, including Belfort, including Sonnen, including Damian Maia, Forrest Griffin, like you said. Man, Dan Henderson, where he pulled out the submission. We were like, wait, what? Man, he was one of the baddest dudes on the planet for a long time. And that's one of the fighters that's just such a no doubter when it comes to the UFC Hall of Fame. And then the last name real quick. I was kind of on, look, I was a huge Cowboy fan for a long time. I've told the story where I met him at the hotel and I even reached into the car to say hello. Look, I'm a huge Cowboy fan. But I understood when people questioned why he would be in the Hall of Fame when he's never won a title. But then a stat popped up to me today when I was doing a little bit more research for this show, Brandon. He has the most performance bonuses in UFC history with 18.
Yep.
There's people that don't even have 18 fights in the UFC ever, total. Mm-hmm. And he has 18 performance bonuses. Do you think Cowboys Hall of Fame worthy?
I mean, hey, man, like you, I'm a Cowboy fan. Like, say, he's one of my favorites. He's in my top 5 when I first started watching. Him, Carlos Condit, Rashad Evans, GSP, people like that. When I first got it, when I was really watching, with Chuck Liddell as well. But I mean, hey, man, like say, he's got a lot of fights, a lot of W's. He does have some L's. He's probably really, I guess you want to say, he probably is the man, what's that word you want to use? Like, he's probably the guy in the UFC who never became a champion besides, I guess, really him and
could never win the big one.
Yeah. Well, no. Well, yeah. Guys who never got to be a champion. So that's like him and Faber. Two guys that
Benavidez.
Yeah. But I mean, hey, man, he had a good career.
I think Sean Sheehan put out a tweet the other day saying which guys who've never won a title are the most deserving. I think the first guy popped into my mind was Joey B. But Cerrone, look, I think Cerrone's worthy. He could never get it done against Benson Henderson and Anthony Pettis and those guys who were the top of the food chain in WEC. But he ran through everybody. Until he ran into Jamie Varner, who was also a champion at the time. He just couldn't get it done in title fights. And of course, late in his career, you look at maybe another guy who fought a little bit too long and he was fighting top guys, but then also he was a gatekeeper as well, because anytime he'd go up against a kid on the rise, he'd shut him down. So you look at 18 performance bonuses, that alone, I think, gets you in the Hall of Fame. Especially when the UFC puts fights in the Hall of Fame, right? Mm-hmm. Like last year, they put the Cub Swanson fight in there. So there's lots of ways to get in the Hall of Fame these days, and it's all a digital thing. It's not like they have they have it set up at the Apex and stuff like that a little bit, but it's not like you can really a place you can go visit and see a Hall of Fame, kind of like WWE. It's kind of it's all who Dana wants to put in. I will give Dana White this much credit, even though I can't stand him right now, and I want to say a lot of curse words about him. I'll give Dana White this much credit. He's put in people he hates. Look, him and Shamrock, not friends. Shamrock is in the Hall of Fame. Tito Ortiz, we know that rivalry very, very well. They almost actually had a real fight, a real scheduled fight. And Tito Ortiz is in the Hall of Fame. They will put in people that deserve it. He'll put
Frank
his friends.
Shamrock's not in it yet.
Frank's not in there, but also I'll say this. Frank Shamrock, for the success he had in the UFC, he almost had more success outside of the UFC. Promotions that the UFC now owns, like Pride and Strikeforce and stuff like that. The reason Frank is actually not in there is because at the time, Dana was, this is a little behind the scenes story people don't know. Dana was very good terms with Ken Shamrock, and Ken and Frank were very bad terms. They're adopted brothers, grew up in the same dad or whatever, or same household, but they are now good now, but at the time they weren't. And at the same time, now Ken Shamrock is also on bad terms with all the lawsuits and everything else and the fighter pay subject and everything else with Dana. Frank Shamrock, Kung Lee, and some of the others that are currently locked in some of these lawsuits with the UFC, I find hard will ever be inducted as long as the lawsuits are going on, Brandon. Because as long as they're going on, you're not going to work out like a separate like licensing deal or contract deal with them that like these quote unquote legends deals you get when you put them in there so they can continue to market you after your career. You're not going to give them money if they're currently suing you for money. And in that case, especially with like the Kung Lee one and the fighters unions and stuff like that, they're actually winning and getting fighters more pay, even back pay. So there's a lot more going on to that one. But I will say, look, if Tito Ortiz can be in the Hall of Fame, anyone can be in the Hall of Fame because we know Tito and Dana. So that's that. Before we get out of here real quick, I do want to say it's not MMA, but it is kind of MMA related. Jorge Masvidal, who throws bare knuckle MMA, bare knuckle boxing, and now regular boxing. Game Bred Boxing 4 taking place this weekend. If you're a fight fan, check it out. Main event, you got Anthony Pettis going against Roy Jones Jr. You got Vitor Belfort versus Jacare Souza. You got Jose Aldo sending Jeremy Stephens one step closer to bare knuckle because he's boxing, Brandon. He's close. Jeremy Stephens and Jose Aldo. And then a number of other people you might know. Pro Gonzalez versus Gina Mazzani, as well as Joe Riggs is stepping in the last second replacement to fight on that card. So a lot of former MMA fighters fighting on this boxing card. Man, Masvidal has his hands in everything. Once his fighting career is over, I feel like that guy's going to be well-to-do for a while because kind of like Khabib, like he's just, promoting. He's doing this. He's actually like, I think second in charge at this point in time with American Top Team. Mm-hmm. Like he's like Dan Lambert's right-hand man. So much going on with Jorge Masvidal. If he can stay out of prison for what is allegedly, knowing the way Colby and Dana are rolling right now, he'll probably beat Gilbert Burns, and then all of a sudden he'll get arrested for what happened. Like, I don't know. Anyway, that's that. Brandon, any final words this week? Anything you want the people to know? Where can they find us? All that good stuff.
I was gonna say I meant to bring it up last show, but I remember now since we were talking about the UFC Hall of Fame, somebody who probably should be going into the UFC Hall of Fame sometime is Benson Henderson. He just recently retired, so I just want to give the man his flowers. A good career. Champion.
That's a guy who always was underrated. Yeah, like people were always rooting against him. The BJ Penn fights, the Frankie Edgar fights, and he just kept winning.
Yeah, like I said, he's a WEC champion. He's a UFC champion. He did have I want to say 3 title shots in Bellator. He just wasn't able to win a Bellator championship. But
he also opened the door for free agency.
Yep. But to me though, he is somebody that should be in the UFC Hall of Fame eventually. And then like now he's just gonna focus on I believe his wife. I believe she's fighting this weekend, so he'll be coaching her.
Yeah. Well deserved. I don't think he'll be right away, but I think he should eventually get in there. I think the biggest thing he did was free agency. He was the first fighter on top of his game to actually jump ship. You see a lot of fighters aging in their career, kind of moving over to Bellator or moving over this one when the UFC releases them. Benson Henderson fought out his contract. He went out on a win and then moved over to the UFC. To Bellator. So it's not often you get a guy who's still in the prime of the career move over like that. Of course, he famously fought for 3 different major promotions, WEC, UFC, and then, of course, Bellator now. So And also, I don't believe he's done yet. I know he said he's done. He said he might be done a couple times. He said he was going to retire like a year after he signed with Bellator. Like, oh, yeah, I'll fight for like one more year. I got this age. I want to be done. And then he kept on going. Look, if a fighter loves what he's doing, he hasn't inflicted a lot of damage on himself. Because, like, Benson Henderson is one of those dudes that really hasn't taken a lot of damage in his career. His last couple fights, he got in some slugfest. But really, a lot of times it's like submission here, submission there, decisions. He hasn't taken a lot of damage. So he might be, 38, 37?
I think he's 39.
39, but he doesn't look it. He definitely doesn't act it. Like, he's got, like, a lot of, like, pep in his step, so to speak. So you never know with these guys. You never know. And, of course, being around his wife, keeping him active, who knows. So, of course, follow us at The Art of MMA on Twitter. Got that account going up last week. Looking forward to interacting with all of you on that one. It is a brand new account. So if you used to follow us, we just happened to get lucky and get the same name back. And nobody stole it from us. So go ahead and give us a new follow. Feel free to send us a message. I'll reply to you. Usually I'm the one doing everything. I might have Brandon kind of ghost on that account from time to time, the way they do with their kickboxing show. Of course, their kickboxing show, I believe, will be back next week.
Yep.
With a new episode. Crossing Borders will be back next week. Art of MMA will be back next week. So we're back in the full flow of everything we're doing. Trying to keep this episode down to a half hour. I know we went 45 minutes again, but it was my fault. I went on a rant. It's my bad. Make sure you like and subscribe. Smash that like button. Smash the subscribe button. Do all that good stuff. And for the mechanic, Brandon Catino, I'm Mike Gann. We'll see y'all next week. We're out.